There aren't many video game franchises out there that are as expansive as Sonic the Hedgehog. This is a franchise spanning decades. Of course, there were bound to be multiple games, shows, movies, comics, more comics, like a lot of comics. I read the DC one, and then this one I got from my cousin when I was a kid. That's about as far as I got. With such a big catalog of content, you know that comes with characters, and man, has Sonic got them. Even if we just consider the games, there are so many Sonic characters out there that it was actually an issue for the fans at a time. I'd always see people back in the day complain about, oh, we see too many of Sonic's friends, I just want to play as the blue fuzzball. And here we are in modern day, nary a bark in sight. The games might not include as many characters as they used to, but the fans definitely picked up what Sega put down. I see people making all sorts of fan art and YouTube videos about these forgotten Sonic characters, and I see these same people get excited when they make a comeback. Like Fang and Superstars, or literally any time an IDW character gets mentioned, it's super exciting to see more obscure characters get limelight in video games. And that's where fan games comes into play. You might not be able to play some characters in official games, but hey, GameJolt's got you covered. With the sheer amount of Sonic fan games out there, there's bound to be some fan favorites included outside of the main cast. But what if we go one layer deeper than that? There might be a lot of Sonic characters with fan games, but how about Sonic characters with fan-made horror games? That's right, I'm answering the age-old question that you've all had since a few seconds ago. Just how many Sonic characters have their own horror game? Now, of course, I'm not talking officially, rather fan-made, because let's face it, you're not going to be able to play as Tails being ripped in half on your Nintendo Switch. Or maybe you can, I don't know, I didn't finish Superstars. Similar to my video I did last year where I saw which Smash Bros characters had their own horror game, I'll be going through and seeing which Sonic characters have one of their own too. Now, this one's a bit trickier because unlike Smash Brothers, there's no definitive list of Sonic characters. I can't just use every named Sonic character, or else we'll be here for 10 hours. I don't think Ruff the Skunk or Professor Pickle are gonna have their own creepypasta games anyways. I leave that up to you fine people to accomplish. So, after much research and planning, I've come up with a list of 70 Sonic characters that I'll be taking a look at. I apologize if I missed any big names or cool characters. I did my best to pick a wide variety, along with some that I wasn't too familiar with. Some are obvious picks, some aren't, and some I included because it was funny and for no other reason. I'll be keeping the list a secret for now. Can't have you know that I included every variation of Professor Pickle, damn it! There's 3 categories a character can fall into. Has a horror game, doesn't have a horror game, or had a horror game, but it's not available for a variety of reasons. But firstly, what exactly constitutes a character having their own horror game? The main criteria is that they must be playable, an antagonist, or a prominent enough character relative to length. If it's simply a mention, a background character, an irrelevant NPC, it doesn't count. However, if it's like a 3-minute game and they're only one of 3 characters, I'll allow it. It also has to be its own game, so this means no ROM hacks, no mods like for the game Friday Night Funkin', no game platforms like Roblox or Dreams, and no Scratch.
Scratch that.
No joke, I found a majority of these characters on Scratch through one person's games. Also, this is a good moment to say don't go out and harass anyone whose games I talk about. Okay, thanks, thank you. And very obviously, it's also gotta be a horror game as well. It doesn't actually have to be scary, but it has to have some intentions of scaring the player or be labeled as a horror game. Representations or forms of a character can also count. For example, if there's an OC called Pickle.mpeg, he would count for Professor Pickle. Lord X would count for X, Evil Shadow would count for Shadow, etc. This has its exceptions and rules though. Characters like Tails Doll won't count for Tails since that's an entirely different character. Classic and modern variants will be counted the same, which includes Robotnik and Dr. Eggman, and transformations will count for the character as well. There's one exception to this, but you'll see why at the end of the video. And lastly, I'm a tiny bit loose with the rules, so if I do something silly, That's why. I'll do my absolute best to uphold these rules and also dive as deep as I possibly can into finding games featuring these characters. If I miss a random ass appearance in Sonic.mp4 Age of Ultron from 2015, or a game that came out seconds before this video gets posted, please don't yell at me about it in the comments. With all that being said, just how many Sonic characters have their own horror game? Starting with... As popular as the Blue Blur is, he doesn't really have any horror games. He makes a brief cameo in Amy and the Sandman, but that's about it. He'll be going into the no horror game category. Sonic.exe is a game made by Mist Crimson based on the creepypasta where you play as Tails, Knuckles, and Robotnik trying to escape a scary version of Sonic. One by one, he kills them all and the game is over. He also raps, he also is blue, and he also frequents my mailbox. To give the game credit, Sonic would not be as prominent in horror if not for the existence of Sonic.exe. Is that a good or a bad thing? I'd argue it's good. Where would we be without Mighty.exe? Back to Sonic. As the titular star of Sonic.exe, he is prominently featured in thousands of horror games. And when I say thousands, I mean thousands. They're all mostly a variation of Sonic.exe, the Disaster 2D, the Destiny, Sonic.eyx, Sonic.mp3, Sonic.fbx, so many file extensions. There's also some non-exe games though, like Green Mountain or Friendship by Not So Devi. If I had to pick some of my personal favorite games to represent Sonic and horror, in no particular order, I would choose Sonic the Hedgehog by Vibing Leaf, Sonic Splatterhouse by Mystical Miss, Sonic Plus by Entertain ERR, Executable Education by Shroudy Software, and Spirits of Hell by Dan the Patient Bear. Although Spirits of Hell is more like Stockholm Syndrome than anything else. There's probably some fantastic ones I'm forgetting to mention, but this is just a taste of what this man's been a part of. And once again, if it weren't for the game based on the story written by a criminal, I guarantee you 98% of the games in this video wouldn't exist. Sonic very easily takes the first spot of a horror game haver. If you know Tails, you know he's got some horror games up his sleeve, mostly ones where he's deconstructed at an atomic level for fun. Pretty much, if there's a Sonic horror game, you're playing as Tails in a Burning Angel Island zone. Outside of the many Sonic.exe game appearances, Tails has got some pretty prominent roles in horror games of his own. One popular example are the games made by Novaware based on the Game Gear games, Sonic 2.exe, Sunshine.exe, and Insanity.exe, all focus on Tails and I think Zalgo or something. For those looking for more substance, you've also got Mobius Dark Time's Tales Story by Pavil's Studio. A really interesting Tails-centered game where it's more story and exploration based than a typical .exe game. For something more traditional Sonic feeling, there's also Tails' Nightmare by The Blocks, a platformer where you play as Tails in a nightmare. Those spikes look delicious. I want to take a big bite out of them. Yes, this is a Flash game, so I'm not 100% if this counts by my rules, but I never said no Flash games, and Tails is in like 10,000 other games, so he still gets up there. Knuckles the Echidna, one of my favorite characters. There's a reason I drink out of him every morning. Knuckles, similar to Tails, is another key player in a lot of Sonic EXE games. It's always a trifecta of Tails, Knuckles, and Robotnik being hunted down by Sonic, so you know immediately he makes it into the horror game tier. But also similar to Tails, he's got a few where he's the more prominent character. For example, in Sonic.eyx, he bounces around your screen a bit. In Sonic EXE Project X by Romeo Hosting, you actually have to track down pieces of the Master Emerald like Sonic Adventure 2, which is cool, and then run away from Scary Tikal. And lastly, in Knuckles.exe, The Emerald Curse by Tails Oh Boy. Knuckles is the main antagonist with blue bloody eyes instead of red.
Blue.
I was curious as to why they didn't make the blood red, but at that point you're just using the paint bucket tool on that poor guy. Knuckles indeed has a horror game. Back-to-back champs, we've got the Doctor up next. Now, I'll be counting either his Dr. Eggman or Dr. Robotnik style, but we've got games for both anyways. In regards to Robotnik, he's once again in every single Sonic.exe game. One of my favorite and least favorite appearances is his gameplay in Spirits of Hell. It was a pretty cool mechanic to give him a broken jetpack, even if it is the most worst, horrible, awful thing known to mankind. In regards to Eggman, look no further than Eggman Secret Base Recoded by Not So Devi. This one has you playing as Tails trying to avoid this infected Sonic that Eggman created. It does backfire on him just a little bit, but he's still a pretty big player in this game. But if you don't want either of those, there's also Project Sad AM by Dark Fox, with Sad AM Robotnik being featured. He just straight up murders Sonic in this one, and it's kinda funny. Ivo completes the big 4 of Sonic horror, but let's be real here, what is 4 if not just 7 minus 3? Because there's 3 more characters that are really prominent in Sonic horror. Did that make any sense at all? Amy's up next, starting off our trio of female characters who are brutalized by Sonic.exe, and sometimes by the other 3 already mentioned. Of course, she's probably most known for her special stage appearance in Sally.exe by Mist Crimson, which is a bit of a spoiler for Sally Acorn, but if you clicked on this video, you already knew she had one. Come on, get real. I like how the special stage is handled in Spirits of Hell Round 2, or Sally.exe, The Whisper of Soul. Really fun stage, albeit difficult, and this game also gives her and the next character really useful roles. If we're talking games solely based on Amy, there's Amy and the Sandman by Lahar, which just wouldn't function well on my end for some reason. Hey, it exists, it's based on Amy, it isn't an EXE game, and it utilizes your printer for some reason. I'd say it's worth a mention. Between those 2 games and a million other EXE shenanigans, Amy is very clearly featured in a horror game. Joining Tails and being a child under 10 who's just constantly torn to shreds by Sonic EXE, Cream is just as utilized in horror games as Amy. She's in Sally.exe, of course, as well as all of the subsequent remakes like Sally Broken Heart by Not So Devi and Sally.exe Finished Nightmare by Jazz Coys. Not much to say here, Cream is featured in a horror game. Okay, this one was weird. Now off rip, I was not expecting anything for Big. I mean, it's Big the Cat. He's already essentially a joke character, especially among fans, so he wouldn't have anything. He had 2 parody games, but that's all I could find. Big the Game by Proxto was actually kinda funny, because after it ended, I kinda just sat on the ending screen, and when I wasn't paying attention, it did this.
Get the fuck out, stupid bitches!
I was about to give up hope, until I stumbled across something absolutely amazing that would not only help Big, but a few other characters on this list. Sonic the Wrath of Evil 2 by Osama Gaming 12. This is such a charming game. It's by no means incredible, but I had a big ol' goofy smile on my face the entire time. You play as Sonic, redacted for spoilers, as you fight a legion of not only variations of Sonic.exe, but evil versions of Sonic characters as well. Its main selling point is easily the animated cutscenes in between each level. This is so sick. It reminds me of those old early 2000 Flash animations that I thought were the coolest things ever. Say whatever you want about the quality of this game, it's clear the creator put their all into it and had a blast making it. Anyways, Big is an official antagonist in this game, using a giant froggy to attack you. You can make the argument that this isn't a horror game, but there's a time or 2 in the cutscenes that could be seen as a horror attempt. Sonic.exe is a pretty prominent character, and the other games in the series are marked as horror. So haha, I win, Big has a horror game. Being arguably the second most popular Sonic character, of course Shadow has a horror game or two under his belt, but not as many as you'd expect. He appears in his fair share of EXE games like Rouge.exe by JBM and Sonic.exe Shadow's Turn by Developer 7, which is a super unoptimized game and was like 7 gigabytes. He's also playable in the aforementioned Sonic Wrath of Evil 2 and a game called Stone of Disaster by Matthew. A very interesting beat-em-up Castlevania type game that makes me think about Wade Whipple. My favorite appearance of Shadow in a game by far though is Sonic Plus. This is not only a super fun and unique take on the EXE format, but the art is just absolutely sick. It's a crime more people don't talk about this game. Go play it yourself. Shadow keeps the streak going and indeed has a horror game. I said her name like 5 seconds ago, so you should already probably know this. All of the world's EXE games are hers to keep. Rouge.exe by JBM is probably her most well-known horror game, being a .exe game about how Sonic X was censored, and then Shadow gets shot in the head, and then the fucking Jigsaw ransomware pops up. For as bare bones as the gameplay is, you have to give this game credit for being absolutely wild. And of course there's Rouge.exe Cloudified by Cloudy Jolt. Huh, they weren't kidding about it being cloudy. Oh, okay, that's my IP address. Rouge is also the other playable character in Stone of Disaster, so this gives Rouge the dishonor of being in an EXE game. For as prominent as Omega is in the mainline games, I feel like I never see anybody talk about him. Where are my E123 Omega fans at? If you're an Omega fan, comment down below. I'm an Omega maniac. I love bullets and Sonic Forces speed battle. Anyways, Omega is saved by Wrath of Evil 2, being a boss fight similar to Big. I'm sure he's in a random EXE game from a decade ago, but regardless, he makes the cut. And of course you can't talk Omega without Gamma. I never played his part in Sonic Adventure, but I loved his skateboard. It only took 11 characters, but we finally found someone with no role in a horror game. I couldn't even find a cameo or anything. Gamma truly somehow avoided the creepypasta treatment. Granted, he's been playable in like 2 games, but Dark Sonic was in 5 seconds of Sonic X, and he's gotten like everything known to mankind. Gamma is the first to grace the presence of the No Horror Game organization. Silver the Hedgehog, one of the big 3, if he only kept up with Sonic in 2008. I feel like Silver is often neglected and disregarded by the community for being, well, Silver. But he does redeem himself in his appearance in horror games. He's playable in Oldham 77's Tikal.exe and Not So Devi's Sonic.exe 2. Sonic.exe 2 is not only a well-made game, but it's based on a sequel to Sonic.exe by the original author that was so unbelievably bad that it was deleted immediately and lost media until it was discovered and revitalized like a year or 2 ago. Would love to talk about Sonic.exe 2 one day, but for now, please enjoy the Silver gameplay. Wonderful. There's also Silver.exe by Enda the Star, but I didn't play that one. Silver Archibald the Hedgehog has a horror game. I just bought Sonic Rush a few days ago, so I'm a bit of a professional. Blaze the Cat, also known as Mildred around these parts, is featured in the aforementioned Sonic.exe 2, and actually has a pretty cool part. You've got to destroy these mirrors as Sonic hops between them. For an EXE game, that's actually something. Blaze is part of a horror game. I'm just gonna rope all 3 of the Chaotix boys together. Espio, Vector, and Charmy. Mighty has to wait his turn. Sorry, goat. Or maybe he doesn't, because the 3 Chaotix are playable in Mighty.exe by Fail Game, a standard EXE game where Mighty is the antagonist, and you take control of Espio, Vector, Charmy, and Ray. Charmy technically counts here. Vector's like the main guy, but Charmy moves with him, so we count it. Espio also cameos in a few other games, but he's also playable in the delisted Sonic.FBX by Alice Weaver. Remember this game for later, it'll come back up. All three of my boys make their way into having a playable part in a horror game. Okay, remember how I said to remember Sonic.FBX? This is why. Fang was indeed an antagonist in Sonic.FBX, and that's great, but the game can't be downloaded anymore, nor can I get my hands on a copy. Which wouldn't be a problem since he appears in so many other Sonic horror games. In the background of Sonic.EYX, he's referenced in Sonic EXE The Destiny, he's a cameo in Sonic Fear 2, a talking part in a cutscene in Sonic.EXE The True Demon, another cutscene in Sonic.EXE Wrath of Mobius. But in every single one of these appearances, it's just not enough to count it as him being prominent enough. The closest would be his cutscene in The True Destiny, but even then it's just like 10 seconds. As much as it pains me to say, Fang doesn't have a horror game. He is, however, the first to be in the yellow tier, has a horror game, but is no longer available. Next up is my second favorite Sonic the Fighters character, Bean the Dynamite. He's another one with a few background cameos, like the ending of Friends.exe by Animator082, where he's evil and scary and red. He's also a casualty in Sonic Fear Tails Doll the Murderer remake. That's a mouthful. Bean might have been in the original Sonic Fear, but I can't remember. It'll be on screen if he is. Unfortunately, even with all of that, Bean does not appear prominently in a horror game. He didn't make it. Bark the Polar Bear is honest to God one of my favorite Sonic characters, if not my favorite. Look at him, he does the big clap at Sonic the Fighters, and then doesn't show up in a Sonic game ever again. This sadly holds true for horror games as well, as I couldn't even find a single appearance of Bark. I did end up finding a scratch game called Sonic the Fighters.exe, created by Brian the Magic Minion. And let me tell you, Brian locked in so hard that they're the sole reason I decided to reinstate the no scratch rule. Mr. Magic Minion alone has made a scratch game for every goddamn Sonic character ever. No joke, if I included Brian's games, half of the list would fill out like nothing. You gotta hand it to him though. Making over 20 games that are the most bare bones Sonic.exe games takes dedication. You'd think by round 25 they'd run out of characters, but nope. Fucking throw Bendy into it, why not? Bark sits in the no horror game corner. Mighty is a classic Sonic character, so you know he's got an EXE game under his belt. It's his birthright. Of course there's the game by Fail Game, but he's also the last playable character in Sonic.exe 2. He's got the most gameplay in that one, hands down, having you find 3 switches while doing some slightly challenging gameplay. The co-star of Sega Sonic the Hedgehog indeed has a horror game. I put Ray the Flying Scare instead of Squirrel in the script. Why did I do that? You'd think Ray just has a handful of random appearances, but he's actually got some decently big games to show for. There's Ray.exe Fighter Flight by Noise Games, where he's in fact Ray.exe. Ray is also playable in Sonic.EYX by Kawa12. He just kinda runs on your desktop for a while and then gets torn to shreds. Not the first time that's happened to me, weirdly enough. Ray joins the many other classic variants as having a horror game. Yet another one of my Sonic the Fighter goats, Honey's up next, and not much to her name. She is a fairly underutilized character in the games as it is, being a scrapped character from Sonic the Fighters and re-implemented in the digital re-release in 2012. She's still chill as hell though, but not chill enough to have her own horror game. She is in the unreleased Five Nights at Sonic's Honeycomb, but that's really about it. Won't be the last time that game's mentioned either. Honey drops down to the no horror game tier. Tikal strangely has a lot. She's got her own horror game called Tikal.exe by Oldham77, where you have to emerald hunt before time runs out. My personal favorite is the appearance she makes in Sonic.exe Project X. That design is actually pretty sick, I can't lie. Tikal makes it onto the list. Vanilla's normally in a lot of these remakes of Sally.exe like Eye of 3, and she's also a fairly prominent character in Mobius Dark Times. However, if those appearances aren't enough for you, she does have her own horror games in the form of VanillaGame.exe 1 and 2. I've talked about these games in the past, but let's just leave it at Vanilla is playable, and even if the games are really bad and full of AI, she's still there. She just can't catch a break, but she can be put in the top tier. Jet, Wave, and Storm are all unfortunately without a horror game, but Jet comes real close. Blair's Rip and Tear by Toucan features Jet as a main antagonist, even having a really cool top-down boss fight against him. And while this game is a spin-off of another Sonic horror game called Miles.eps, it just isn't one itself, and therefore, the Birdman can't be counted. We could go back to our good old friend Brian the Magic Minion for our fill of scratch goodness, but we're not gluttonous here. Listen, if Bean and Bark didn't have a horror game, no way in hell Marine the Raccoon has one. Alright, so there's this little series called Five Nights at Sonic's. If you saw my Smash Bros video, you'll know that I had a really solid tactic. Look for FNAF fan games. Chances are that a Five Nights at Whoever game would always be out there, and with Sonic, oh boy, did I have a lot to digest. Five Nights at Sonic's is a super expansive and well-known FNAF fan game series, with tons of entries to choose from. Granted, it also featured Mario characters, Sonic characters were still just as featured. This brings us to Five Nights at Sonic's Solar Switch Up by Sunrose. It's apparently based on the Soul Dimension from Sonic Rush, which is where Marine is from, so I'm not super shocked she was in this game, but I was a bit surprised she was in any game at all. Good for her. You know what, maybe I'll play that new copy of Sonic Rush to support her. She's in Sonic Rush Adventure, isn't she? You know what? I'm embarrassed now, so she's going straight to Dead Zone tier. For as mid as Superstars was, it did bring us some cool new things, like Trip. I really like Trip. I had no clue she was supposed to be a reptile for a while, because who the hell knows what a sun gazer is? Apparently it's this. Anyways, between her recency in the franchise and her slight obscurity, I couldn't find any games featuring her. Sorry to the 2 Superstars fans out there. My condolences. Barry covers our red wolf-looking main character quota. Sorry, Avatar, but you didn't make the list. If you really want to include Avatar, you could just say it's any Sonic OC. See, there he is, just like from Sonic Forces. Barry surprisingly does feature in a horror game titled Robotnik's Castle by Zarik R. It's another FNAF-like game, but with one small issue. I can't play it. It hasn't been officially released yet, but I did try to message the creator to get my hands on a demo. If it's playable, I can count it. Unfortunately, I didn't get the demo in time for this video, but the creator did confirm that there's enough for a demo. So where does that put Barry on this list? You know what, just so Fang isn't lonely, let's just throw Barry in the has a horror game but it's not available list. Enjoy the company. Chip's got nothing. Closest I could find was this art on Reddit of a creepypastified Chip. Down on the list he goes. I know they aren't the same character, but they're similar enough to be roped together. Bad news for my Robo Boys, neither makes an appearance in a horror game. Of course, Brian's got us covered for Emerald on the scratch front in Sonic.exe Round 18, but despite this, they both still don't make the cut. We're finally onto some bad guys, starting with one of my favorite characters, Metal Sonic. You'll hear me say that at least a few more times in this video. I like Sonic characters, sue me. In the world of Sonic.exe, if Robotnik is in a game, it's likely Metal is right behind him. Not only are there multiple appearances as being playable or an important asset to the story, but he's got some bigger roles as well. One of the earliest examples of this is Sonic Fear 2 by Yes Man 10. Metal Sonic gets just a little corrupted by the Tails doll and goes on an absolutely insane murder spree. Sonic Fear definitely needs its own video one day, because this series is just amazing. Bloody PNGs and evil, silly laughs are burned into your senses as you have to fight Sonic.exe, Tails Doll, and of course, evil Metal Sonic. There's also a newer game called Metal Sonic Apparition, which takes a different approach than the normal EXE one. It has Metal be possessed by these goopy worm fellas. Great stuff. I couldn't find anything for Neo Metal Sonic, by the way. Not that it would have mattered, but I just wanted to mention my special little man. Metal has a horror game. You know, I think it'd be harder to find a non-horror fan game for Tails Doll. This man lives and bathes in creepypasta, and not much else. I mean, he's the main antagonist in the Sonic Fear series. He's the main antagonist in Tails Nightmare. His mug is all over the Novaware games. He's the namesake of Tails Doll The Courage Awakens. What else do you want me to say? He's basically a creepypasta icon, and I wish Sega would make a plush of him into the scary game tier. Now, originally, Metal Knuckles was going into the not available tier since he's in Robotnik's castle. However, we can thank the Luigi Kid EXE challenge I had to judge, because turns out he's also a boss in the game Sonic.exe Wrath on Mobius by Lolo Bird. He's also the main antagonist in Blair's Rip and Tear, which once again isn't horror, but I love seeing my other metal son get some love. One of the only Funko Pops I willingly own, makes for a great tool to play these .exe games with. Into the horror game tier. So when I say Mecha Sonic, there's technically 3 versions: Mecha Sonic Mark 1, Mark 2, and Mark 3. I'll be counting any of the 3, but I also found games for Marks 1 and 2. Mark 2 is not only included, but also playable in Sonic_Unleashed_WAD.GCR by Toucan. As for the Silver Bastard, he's playable in Necrosis, also by Toucan. Toucan's really carrying the slightly obscure Sonic character horror market, but I'm not complaining. Mecha makes it into the horror game havers. Sage was a really surprising one. Frontiers isn't exactly brand new, but I thought it was new enough to not really be touched by horror games. However, I was mistaken, as the FNAF tactic proves useful once again. Five Nights at Sonic's 2 Halloween Edition, fan-made by DaAwesomeMimic_1213. Need to breathe after saying all of that. Even though she's in a pirate costume, that is in fact Sage. See right there, EXE eyes and all. Sage somehow makes it up there with her dad and brother. Next up is Infinite, and listen, I know the whole joke with him in the community is that he's a fraud, but I quite literally forgot to write a part for him in the script, even though I played a whole game practically for him. That's just funny, you can't write that. Anyways, Infinite was in the previously mentioned Sonic Wrath of Evil 2 as a playable character. Sorry, I almost forgot you there, buddy, but hey, at least you're in a good game now. Alright, let's knock these 3 out right now. Mephiles, Black Doom, and Chaos aren't anywhere to be seen in a horror fan game. You'd think they'd all be perfect for it, being villains with genuine scary potential, but nah. Most we've got is Mephiles in O'Brien Spectacular, and Chaos in the unreleased Sonic Wrath of Evil Mega Duality. Didn't even bother making logos for these guys, but do you know who I will bother making a logo for? I don't know why I made a logo for them, they're not in a horror game either. Scratch and Grounder are being grouped together similar to Cubot and Orbot because, let's be real, they're a duo through and through. Can't have one without the other. Now, they do make a brief appearance in Spirits of Hell, which I remembered without any research. They had zero real impact in that game. In fact, they were relegated to being a bad option that gets you killed. Regardless, they are featured in the ever so popular FNAF fan game, Five Nights at Pingus. This, might not be a horror game. I totally went into these two being like, oh yeah, they were in that old FNAF fan game. But now that I'm playing it, this is clearly not made with the intention to scare someone. If the jump scares were at least trying, you could maybe make the argument that it's meant to be scary, but not a single one is startling. This is a parody game, isn't marked as horror on GameJolt, and therefore doesn't count. Actually, now that I think about it, Grounder wasn't even in that game! Thankfully for us, Robotnik's Castle once again comes in clutch with an antagonist role for the two of them, landing them both into the not available category. Scratch and Grounder might have started off our group of TV show characters, but Sally is really starting it off. If you've got absolutely zero knowledge of Sonic.exe, but all of the knowledge of Sonic, you might be thinking, why would Sally of all people have a horror game to her name? I don't know, just a hunch. She's honestly the second biggest character for this shit behind Sonic, and it's all because of the original Sally.exe game by Mist Crimson. Don't get me wrong though, she's got some good appearances. She plays pretty well in Sonic.exe, the Disaster 2D, and the original Roblox game, but that's gone. She's playable in Sonic.exe 2, one of the main characters in the previously mentioned Whisper of Soul, tons of options to choose from for your scary Sat AM fill. Oh, and who could forget the iconic Sally Broken Heart, featuring my favorite Sonic character, Tiara Boobowski. There's a horror game featuring a scrapped character from a scrapped Sega Saturn game with the last name starting with Boob, but nothing for Jet the Hawk. Alright, gotcha. Sally, this isn't your fault, but I'm still taking it out on you. Manic and Sonia are two separate characters on this list, but I'm covering them together because they're both in the same game. Round666.exe by Sanic says, I actually covered this game a long time ago on my channel, back when I used a blue snowball and an audio recording website. This game is what you think of when you think stereotypical.exe game. No gameplay, super cheesy blood and jump scares, and it's buggy as hell. It does help us get Manic and Sonia into the horror game tier, but do you know what else helps us do that? Five Nights at Sonic Hedgehog's Horror. It's not out yet. Damn it! I can't catch a break. Just really sticks it to you, huh? Did not mean that literally. Styx does get hit with the magic minion treatment, but there really isn't much under her belt. She's an NPC and figure in the story to Mobius Dark Times, but she just doesn't do enough in that game to justify calling her prominent. If she just had a few more lines, a little more plot importance, I could have included her. Alas, there's no avoiding the sickness that is not having an EXE game, and Styx is fucking terminal. Scourge starts up our comic characters, and similar to a lot of others on this list, he's lent a helping hand by Brian, but other than that, there's nothing. No horror game for the Green Menace. Surge is a fairly popular character from the comics, but how does she hold up in the world of fan-made horror games? Well, she doesn't have a classic variant, so it's already not looking good for her. The closest thing is that Five Nights at Sonic's Honeycomb game by Betrayed that I mentioned earlier. It also includes Kit from the comics, which is cool, but still doesn't count because the game isn't out yet. Surge hits the bottom of the list. Tangle's also another IDW character who just doesn't have much. There was this game called Evil the Sackboy The Nightmare Continues, which features her and an EXE variant, but it sadly doesn't count. This is a game on Dreams, a PS4 game creator. Now you know why I included Dreams in the rules. Tangle is also supposed to be featured in Five Nights at Whispers, but I have a feeling this is another abandoned devlog on GameJolt. Speaking of Whisper, just like Tangle, Whisper's got absolutely nothing but a FNAF devlog. It's genuinely surprising that even the most popular IDW characters have next to nothing when it comes to fan games. Not even just horror ones, there's barely any fan games whatsoever. Now don't get me wrong, there's definitely mods out there, but I feel like some traditional Sonic 2D platformers with these guys would go crazy. Somebody get on that real quick. I'll pay you $5 and give you my IP address. Are you positive? Okay, thank you. Okay, so turns out nobody wants to take that offer because Rouge EXE Cloudified already gave that info out for free. And if Surge, Tangle, and Whisper all don't have horror games, you bet your ass Lanolan doesn't have one. Sorry, bud. Someone will make a Lanolan.exe one day. And look no further than ChowGarden.exe by Falonso Dev. It's modeled after the tiny Chow Garden from the GBA games, and has you raising a Chow and buying a TV. I talked about this in my first Sonic horror video, and I think I was a little too harsh on it. I mean, I could play rock, paper, scissors for hours, don't test me. But what's important here is that a Chow is front and center, and therefore has a horror game. But who was the cute mass-produced animal creature before the Chow? The Flickies, of course. The Flicky theme still plays in my head sometimes, even though I haven't played or seen gameplay since I was 8. Or I guess until now. Anyways, there's a million horror games where the Flickies are just slaughtered and strewn about. But is there a game where they're actually important? The Death of the Freedom Fighters remake by Hisped. Robotnik accidentally launches a deadly virus, again, and this includes infecting a zillion Flickies. You actually have a whole dedicated chase scene avoiding the Flickies and eventually their attacks as you fall. Pretty cool way to include the Flickies as antagonists. Now if only someone could put the fuck-ass cat in a horror game. We can only pray. Now, I might be stretching with this one, but the Wisps technically are playable in a way through Sonic.exe Hero's Last Stand by Eevee Lover Does Gaming. When you play as Metal Sonic, his main weapon and mechanic is the Wisp Launcher. It lets you do different types of wisps throughout the game, and considering Metal doesn't do much else here, they're an essential part of his character. Thus, I decree that wisps are prominently included in a horror game. Take that, Styx! I'll be counting any classic badniks from the mainline games for this one. So the Ladybug, the Flying one, the Crab one, any of those would count. The Deformation Other Side by Alhir CR lets you play as multiple badniks in a fairly cool Sonic horror game. On the opposite side, Lockdown Code Egg by ProSonic Games has the badniks be the antagonist. Hard to be intimidated by a scary Motobug, but he's doing his best. Badnik rolls on into the horror game Havers. Now, Egg Robo is technically just a badnik, but I feel like he's a big enough character to have his own character in this video. Also, I didn't want to include the hard-boiled heavies, so he's here to represent. Miles.eps by Toucan has you play as Robotnik, but as he's dying, he manages to turn himself into the Egg Robo, which you can play as. It counts, that's an Egg Robo if I've ever seen one. Onto the list it goes. Okay, you might be mad with me on this one, but because I thought it was funny, I decided to include all 6 members of the Deadly Six on this list. I thought surely one of them weaseled their way into a creepypasta game at some point, so let's see what I came up with. No. No. Definitely not. Probably not. Thankfully not. And last but not least, the most popular of the Deadly Six. Sega really pushed for Zavok to be as popular as other villains, but it clearly didn't work. I mean, where's Zavok.mp3? While he is planned to be a boss in Sonic the Wrath of the Evil Mega Duality, I couldn't find anything for the Red Menace. All of the 6 Deadly Six members do not have their own horror game. Call it waste of 6 spots, I call it slightly funny. We're coming to a close on our list, so of course I had to finish out with all of the humans, starting with Gerald Robotnik. See, I envisioned some FNAF-like game where Gerald made the robots or something and he like left behind a diary. I don't know, there's some potential there though, I swear. Nothing for the old man, but what about his own blood? I thought with the existence of the Maria's Revenge creepypasta, there would be something for her, but I couldn't find anything. But how about her hedgehog design? There's a super popular unofficial hedgehog variant of Maria, something about her being transformed after dying. And this hedgehog version, in fact, does have her own horror game, starring in Maria.exe, Sonic EXE Round 17. God damn it, Brian. We know you're carrying this video on your back, but there's no need to overachieve. Human or not, Maria does not feature in a horror game. Chris.
Oh my God.
The human character that nearly everyone hated. I haven't watched Sonic X since I was a kid, so I don't exactly remember why everyone hated him. I think he was just like super privileged or something, which, valid. But how did so many people just look at him and go, I fucking hate that happy child! Chris Sonic X Thorndyke is the proud owner of 4 different horror games, all in the Sonic X.exe series. In some of them, Chris is the main antagonist, and in some of them, he's playable. I hate to keep bringing it up, but this asshole gets 4 games while Bark gets none. This has to be nepotism on behalf of Chuck or something. I begrudgingly put Chris into the horror game havers community. Of course, we can't have a Sonic character list without the movies. Sorry, Wade, you didn't make the cut. You'll have your own entire video one day. Agent Stone doesn't really have any games, but I just wanted to include him because he's my favorite. There's a shitty walking simulator for you in my heart, Stone. And the final character to round us out to 70 is the iconic, memorable, one and only...
There's nothing.
Okay, to be fair, Tom somehow does appear in a fan game, but that's really it. I was surprised to see him in anything at all. And before we wrap up here, I wanted to throw one extra character in as a little bonus. Super Sonic. Now, I said way at the beginning that forms didn't count as separate, but it's Super Sonic, come on. There's a few games where you fight as Super Sonic, but in games like Sonic.exe Nightmare Beginning and Sonic.exe The Destiny, you actually have to fight a Super Sonic.exe. That's actually kinda cool. Makes them less scary, but still cool. You know what's even cooler? Hypersonic.exe in Sonic Reclassified. That game's so dumb though. You're telling me Knuckles can hold back Sonic, hold back Hypersonic, and then get crushed by a boulder? The same boulder he deflected moments prior? Couldn't even let Hypersonic have the big kill of this game. Had to give it to the base form. You know, the epilepsy fan base lost big today. Are you happy with yourself? And that finally brings us to an end of this super expansive and super well made list of Sonic characters and whether or not they have a horror game. Let's do the math and see how this tallies out. Shh, I'm a Sonic fan, I can't do math. Out of 71 Sonic characters, 37 of them were prominent in a horror game or had a horror game of their own. 31 characters had no appearance in a horror game or one that wasn't significant enough to the game itself. 3 characters have a horror game, but it's not available for a variety of different reasons. And finally, couple characters got sent to the dead zone. I moved them back, I swear. And that's only from the characters I included on this list. There are so many Sonic characters out there that I guarantee you one of the ones I missed has their own .exe game out there. This just goes to show how unique and expansive the array of Sonic characters is. Okay, unique might be stretching it a bit because how many characters are just name the and then a random animal? I'm never gonna forget about the skunk. Sonic horror games kinda fucking suck, but they also kinda fucking rule. This was easily the most amount of .exe and creepypasta games that I've played surrounding this hedgehog, and it honestly made me grow a new appreciation for these things, while at the same time, making me bored as hell. But in forcing myself to explore the deep depths of Sonic horror fan games, it made me find some gems in the rough, ones I've never heard of that deserve the attention they never got. I hope this wacky sort of ranking video inspires you to try out some of the games I talked about, or maybe even go out and try some other ones. Sonic horror games are almost a guilty pleasure of mine. I can acknowledge that there are some good ones, but I can also acknowledge that there are some really bad ones. But even the bad ones can be tons of fun, just laughing at the goofy attempts at horror. With all of that being said, don't play these games in front of anyone you know. I'm like 75% sure that if you show this image to someone over the age of 50, they'll just go into a coma. You'll never see them again.